So the first type of graph we're going to be looking at are bar graphs. So let's try these examples here. So let's compare these graphs. So this one and this one. Each of these graphs has 3 categories. So you can see them in the bar graph. We have A, B, C, as well as in the circle graph. There are 3 different sections, A, B, and C. Is it possible that both these graphs show the same data? Yes. We can represent data in many different types of graphs. They'll just look a bit different, but they all will say the same thing if we know how to read them correctly. Now let's look at the next example here. Amy is a conservation officer. She educates people about problem bears. These are bears close to food in populated areas. What information can Amy get from this graph? So this graph here, let's see, it's problem bears in a district in British Columbia. Now we have the number of bears as well as the years. So let's describe the data in this double bar graph. So a double bar graph is when we have the bars right next to each other. So there's 2 types of data going on here. We have grizzly bears as well as black bears. So instead of making a separate graph for grizzly bears and then a separate one for black bears, it's nice to do a double bar graph so we can easily compare the 2 side by side. So let's describe the data in this double bar graph. The categories on the horizontal axis are, well, the horizontal axis is the one down here. So that would be the years from 1992 to 2001. And the 2 groups of data that there are grizzly bears and black bears. Describe the trend. As the years increased, the number of problem black bears blaked until 1995. So let's see, black bears, those are the darker shades here. So let's start off at the first year, which would be 1992. And let's see what happened to the black bears. So there was a little bit, and then it went higher and higher. And until 1995, it kept going up. So the number of problem black bears kept increasing until 1995. Then it decreased, except for, well, where's the one spot that it stopped decreasing? Well, it kept going down here, down here, down here, but then look, it rose a bit over here. So except for 1999. So the trend is black bear number increased until 1995, then it decreased, except for in 1999, where there was a little bit of an increase. Now let's look at the range. So for the range, we look at the biggest number and then we subtract the smallest number from it. So let's start looking at black bears. The biggest number they say is 20. So where we could find that is right up here, and I'll put a little star by it. This is where we had 20 black bears. But now we need to subtract the lowest amount. So if we're looking at our graph here, the lowest amount would either be here or here. These 2 are both the same. So if we look to see what number that is and we follow it to the side here, it leads us to 5. So we're going to do 20 minus 5, which is equal to 15. So the range for the black bears is 15. Now let's do the same thing for the grizzly bears. This time they gave us the smallest number, which is 1, which I guess would be way down here at 1. But now they want the biggest number. So let's look. The biggest number is clearly up here. And I would say that is approximately 32. So let's do 32 minus 1 is 31. So 31 is the range for the grizzly bears. Now let's circle the correct word. The greater range means that the number of problem grizzly bears changed more than that of black bears. So there was more of a change within the results of the grizzly bears than there was with the black bears, which is why there's more of a difference between the highest and the lowest amount. There was more of a change. So let's move on to the next page here. In this example, we have councils in 2 British Columbia towns that conducted a survey. They wanted to choose 3 ways to protect bears and keep communities safe. The results are shown in the chart. What decision might they make from the data? So let's start working our way through this. Let's look at the solution steps over here. So it says, what is the maximum number of votes in a category? So let's look at this category here. The biggest number of votes we have is 1,020. And in this one, the biggest number we have is 711. So the most number of votes or the maximum number of votes in a category is 1020. That's the most that appear in one of the categories. So now we have to use this maximum number of votes to help us choose a scale for the horizontal axis. So our axis always starts at 0. And we need to choose a scale or an interval to jump up by on each of these little points here. That'll eventually reach us to get 1020 on our graph. So we're able to display all the data. So an appropriate scale to use here would be going up by 200s. So if we had 200 there, then 400, 600, 800, and 1000 over here. So now they want us to complete the rest of the bar graph. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a title. This is the Bear Smart Program. And we are going to have all of our categories or all of our suggestions on the side over here. So I'm just going to write those in right now. So now I placed each of the categories on the vertical axis over here. And I shortened this suggestions just a little bit to not take up too much space. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put the bars on our graph. So let's start off with uses electrical fence. Well, I guess before we do this, we need a little bit of a legend. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have town 1 be red, and I'm going to have town 2 be green. So starting off with uses electric fence, town 1 has 1020 votes. So I'm going to take my red and I'm going to make a nice little bar going up all the way until 1020 approximately. So the 1000 mark is right over here. So 1020 would be just above 1000. And I'll just shade that in here. And let's do the same thing for town 2. So we have 711. So the 700 mark would bring us on this line over here. So 711 would be just above that, so somewhere there. And I'll shade this in as well. Okay, let's do the next one here. Let's remove brush. So for town number 1, they had 294 votes. So I'm going to go up here to 294. That's close to 300, so it would be approximately there. And then town number 2 said 47. So that's going to be way down here somewhere. And we're going to keep making this graph. I'm going to go fill in the rest, and I'm going to hop ahead the videos so you can see the end result. So there we go. Now I put in the bars on my bar graph, and I forgot one last thing here. We need to label our axes. So on the vertical axes, I'm going to put here that these are the suggestions. And on the horizontal axes, I'm going to put the number of votes. And now we're done this graph. So in part B, now they want us to analyze this data a little bit. They want us to mark the top 3 choices for town 1 with a check mark. So let's see what 3 got the most votes for town 1. So town 1 I have in red. The 3 highest ones would be the electric fence, the garbage on pickup day only, as well as move to the wild. And then the top 3 for town 2, let's mark them with an asterisk. So the highest one would be over here, second highest would be over here, and the third highest would be this one over here. And the final step here is what 2 choices would you suggest? And you can justify your choices. This is all personal opinion, so if you don't want to move the problem bears to the wild, then you probably wouldn't choose that one. I think that putting garbage out on pickup day only would be a good idea, but that's my own personal preference. So in C, you can put whatever your heart desires.